This story is inspired from a true incident which happened in Alabama last year. An inmate was assigned to transport other prisoners safely, but things went downhill. More on this after this story. I've been locked up at a state prison in Arizona since 2007. It's really not all bad. I've made some connections over the years, and I mostly get to do what I want. The guys that give me trouble, well, I have people to take care of them. And the guards know better than to start anything when I'm around. It helps that my brother on the outside hooks me up with supplies. I won't tell you what exactly. Just think of me as a businessman, even though I'm locked up. I have a few guards in my pocket, too. They're pretty easy to control when wads of cash are involved. Last month, I got a new job driving the transport vehicles. Davis, the head of transportation here, had to pull a few strings on my behalf. To get the higher-ups to sign off. But he fought for me. He said that the extra responsibilities were part of my rehabilitation. And guess what? Those idiots believed it. Some people started bitching about it, though. There was a protest outside the prison, probably because the local news hates me. People had signs and everything. Then, the next morning, I started the job. I had to drive 2 inmates to Tucson, which would be about 2 hours through the empty desert. It would be so easy to just drive off, head to Mexico. But I wouldn't do that. Life was too good. When we got out into the garage, the protesters were still there. I recognized a few of the old ladies that had testified against me after I mugged them. They were probably the ones to rile everyone else up. Without them, no one would have cared that the prison had hired an inmate as one of the drivers. Other prisons do it all the time. It's a cost-cutting thing. I'm not an angry person, despite what everyone says about me. But in that moment, I was pissed. This was a good gig, and I didn't want some random strangers to ruin it for me. It started raining, and the crowd dispersed. Serve them right. The guards guided my passengers into the van, and then I got in the driver's seat. They opened the gates, and we drove off, just as the rain was getting worse. I wasn't supposed to talk to the passengers, but they kept chatting among themselves, and I knew they were talking about me. I couldn't make out their words exactly, but what else could they be talking about? I could see their smug faces in the rear view. They were agreeing with those damn protesters, probably because they were jealous. I looked over my shoulder and shouted for them to shut up. They did, but I still felt angry. The rain was getting worse, and I was driving faster than I should have. This was an official vehicle, so it's not like I'd get pulled over. I could do whatever I wanted. Then, one of the passengers, a gangbanger named Miguel, muttered something under his breath. "What did you say?" I asked him. He just rolled his eyes, knowing that I couldn't do anything to him once he got dropped off in Tucson. I pressed my foot even harder on the pedal. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really speeding up. 20 miles over the limit. Then 30. I noticed that Miguel was grabbing onto the seat in front of him. That's when I had an idea. If these punks were going to challenge me, then I'd use my driving skills to teach them a lesson. There weren't any other cars on the road, so I had all the space in the world. I sped up even more, weaving back and forth across the line like I was drunk. I was in total control, of course. I hadn't really driven anything for decades aside from some practice laps with Davis, but I knew what I was doing. I was scaring these idiots, keeping them in line. "Have you gone mad? You will kill us all!" The other guy said the same thing. They were totally freaking out. I felt proud of myself. After living behind bars for all these years, I felt totally free, totally in control. It came out of nowhere, hidden by a puddle of rainwater. I lost control of the wheel and the van went sliding. We skidded off the road, crashed through some brush, and ended up in a ditch. My body slammed into the steering wheel, and I felt a couple of my ribs crack. I could literally hear them break. Then everything went black. I'm not sure how long I was out, but it was probably only seconds. When I opened my eyes, my leg was throbbing and I could barely breathe. The door next to me had fallen off in the crash, so I slowly climbed out. I limped to safety, but my passengers weren't so lucky. I could see them through the broken windows. One of the guys in the back was crushed in the wreckage. Miguel was still alive, but he was all cut up, and his arm was pinned under the crumpled seat. "Help me out!" he pleaded. He sounded so pitiful. "You gonna apologize to me first?" I asked. He didn't. He said he didn't do anything wrong. He said that I was a psychopath. In the end, I didn't help any of them get out of the van. I just sat on the side of the road and waited for the cops to arrive. It felt good to be mostly unharmed. One of the perks of being the driver in charge. I guess I passed out again after that. When I woke up in a hospital bed, I was in handcuffs and I couldn't really move my body. My first thought was that the passengers had lied about me, saying that I was driving erratically for no reason. My second thought was that I couldn't move my legs. The doctor came in with one of the bigwigs at the prison. I asked about Miguel specifically, but I guess he wasn't really hurt at all. Then the doctor gave me the bad news. After the adrenaline of the accident wore off, I got a blood clot in my head. I was declared dead for a couple of minutes, but they revived me. He tested my nerves by poking my feet, but I couldn't feel anything. It's too early to tell if I'll be paralyzed, but it doesn't look good. I'm still recovering now. I keep thinking about my last drive. I had felt so free. But all that was gone now. On a stormy evening in 2024, an inmate, not disclosing the name due to privacy reasons, was serving 20 years for armed robbery. He was driving a van carrying 6 other inmates back from their work release jobs at private manufacturers. Despite a history of escape attempts and failed drug tests, the inmate was unsupervised. Witnesses say he drove recklessly, speeding and listening to music through earbuds before losing control on wet roads. The van hit a tree, ejecting several passengers. 2 inmates died, and the main inmate was critically injured. Survivors have questioned the Alabama Department of Corrections' decision to entrust lives to a known risk.
This story is inspired from a true incident, which happened with 3 families in Washington. I will tell you more about it later. It was a Wednesday morning, and I arrived at the office with my usual latte in hand. My supervisor, Mr. Reynolds, was waiting outside my cubicle, arms crossed, his face tight with anger. The moment I stepped into the office, he motioned for me to follow him. It was unusual. He never came out to greet anyone personally, let alone me. I felt a prick of unease, but I had no idea what was coming. Inside his office, he closed the door with a loud thud and turned to face me. "Jennifer," he said, his tone grim, "I want you to explain these messages." He shoved his phone under my nose. The screen showed screenshots of vile text messages sent from my number, laced with obscenities and lewd offers. My heart hammered in my chest. I don't understand," I stammered. "These weren't from me. Someone must have hacked my phone." I glanced at the timestamps. They were sent in the middle of the night. I had been asleep at the time. Mr. Reynolds shook his head. "That's not all." He pulled up another folder on his computer. Confidential files from our client's account were leaked late last night. The IP address was traced to your work laptop. His usually calm, fatherly face was replaced with betrayal and disgust. I tried to form words, but nothing coherent came out. My thoughts spun, and the room suddenly felt airless. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was my boyfriend, Tyler. Relieved to have a familiar voice to ground me, I answered. But Tyler's harsh tone was almost frantic. "Jen, what the hell's going on?" he shouted. "Why did you post those videos of us? Our private videos online?" My blood went cold. I could barely get out a whisper. "Tyler," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't post anything. I've been hacked, I swear." "Don't lie to me," he seethed, and then the line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling as though my entire world was crashing in on me. It dawned on me that whoever had leaked the office files had also accessed my personal data. I tried to explain this to Mr. Reynolds, but his face remained unmoved. "Clean out your desk," he said, voice taut with fury. "I don't want you in this building until we figure out what's going on." I left his office in a daze. My colleagues stared at me, some with pity, others with suspicion. My hands trembled as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box. I felt tears threatening to spill over, but I held them back. The last thing I needed was to break down in front of everyone. Halfway through packing, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother, sounding more rattled than I'd ever heard her. "Jennifer, are you okay? We got these texts. They're threatening us. Your father is worried sick. Something about us paying the price if you don't keep your mouth shut." "Mom, I trailed off, feeling as though I had stepped into a nightmare. "Listen, I didn't send those. Someone is hacking me, trying to ruin my life. Please, go to the police and show them the messages." Her voice shook. "We will, but be careful, sweetie. Whoever this is, they seem dangerous." After we hung up, I took a moment to steady myself. My family was now in the crosshairs because of some twisted vendetta. I turned and almost collided with my best friend at work, a marketing associate named Brooke. She'd been among the onlookers, but had broken away to see if I was all right. "What's going on?" she whispered, helping me throw the last of my pens and notebooks into the box. I could barely speak. "I'm being framed," I rasped. "I need to go to the police." She nodded, clutching my arm in support. "I believe you. Let me know if there's anything I can do." With that small comfort, I left the building, feeling as though I had been banished from a place that had once been my refuge. Down at the local police station, I could hardly catch my breath. An officer named Harris took my statement. "Do you have any enemies?" he asked gently. "Someone who might want to hurt you in such a personal and far-reaching way?" I frowned, thinking back over the last few months. Then a name flashed in my mind: Martin Powell. "There was a guy named Martin," I said, feeling a sudden chill. "He used to work at the company. He was fired 2 weeks ago after I raised concerns about his behavior and performance. But," I hesitated, guilt gnawing at me, "he was actually very dedicated. The real reason he got fired might have been office politics. I never expected him to go to this extreme." Harris nodded gravely. "We'll look into him. In the meantime, make sure you secure all your accounts, phone, email, social media, and let your family know to do the same. We'll keep you posted." The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. "Your life is about to crumble piece by piece. Shouldn't have messed with me." I dropped my phone in horror. There was no doubt now. Martin was behind this. He wanted me to suffer. In a panic, I called Harris. "He just threatened me again," I said breathlessly. "Send me the screenshot," he replied. "We're closing in on him, but we need more evidence. We got a warrant to check into his digital footprint. Stay safe, and don't try to confront him alone." Tyler finally agreed to talk, though his trust in me was shaken. We met at a coffee shop. The moment I saw him, I ran into his arms, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "I'm sorry I doubted you. It's just, those videos were so personal. I couldn't believe you'd put them out there. It felt like such a betrayal." I saw the hurt in his eyes and felt my guilt well up. "It wasn't me," I assured him. "I promise I'll make this right." He nodded slowly. True to his word, Detective Harris contacted me 2 days later. "Jennifer," he said, "we've tracked the source of those malicious texts and the file leaks. Everything leads back to Martin. We believe he acted alone, hacking your phone and computer through a backdoor program. Relief washed over me, though my nerves still felt raw. So what happens now? He cleared his throat. We've placed him under arrest. He tried to flee the state, but we caught him at the bus station. We have enough evidence to charge him with cyberstalking, extortion, and unauthorized computer access. On the 25th of June, 2007, 3 families in Washington reported a terrifying ordeal, claiming their cell phones were hacked and turned against them. The harassment began with threatening calls and texts, including chilling death threats. The stalkers seemed to know their every move, from their clothing to private conversations, even recording interactions with police. Investigators traced the calls back to the victims' phones, even when turned off, leaving authorities and phone companies mystified. Experts suggested advanced hacking techniques might have transformed their phones into spying devices. Despite months of investigation, the identity of the restricted caller remained unknown, leaving the family shaken and the case unresolved.
This story is based on a true incident which happened with a woman in Ohio. She ended up losing a lot of money just because of a phone call. My name is Olivia Carson, and for most of my adult years, I considered myself a cautious person, especially with finances. Yet one single phone call shattered that illusion. It all started after I scored a great deal on a pair of winter boots. I found a discount coupon online, something that felt too good to pass up. I reasoned it was legitimate, a good-looking coupon site, a brand I trusted, and I paid using my debit card. A week passed, and the boots arrived without a hitch. My colleague and close friend Lucy teased me about always hunting for bargains, but she also admired my knack for saving a few dollars on quality items. A couple of days after I received the boots, I was riding the subway home from work when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unknown number. Typically, I would ignore such calls, but I was in a strange mood, slightly bored, so I answered. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice guarded. "Is this Miss Olivia Carson?" A stern male voice resonated over the line. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Officer Daniel Perez, from the Cybercrime Investigation Unit," he replied. "We have reasons to believe your personal information has been compromised and is being used for criminal activities." My heart skipped a beat. Criminal activities? What are you talking about? "Our records show suspicious online transactions linked to your identity. We suspect you've been hacked," he said. "I understand this might be alarming, but we need your cooperation to clear you from any wrongdoing." "Of course," I blurted, worry creeping into my gut. "Tell me what I need to do." In the background, I could hear faint clicking, as though he was typing on a keyboard. It made everything seem official, like a bustling government office. "First," he continued, "you must not discuss this case with anyone. These criminals are highly sophisticated. They could be monitoring your communications and even your location. The best way to ensure your safety is to remain isolated until we complete your verification." I felt goosebumps on my arm. The concept of being watched was terrifying. I understand. Is there anything else?" "Go straight home. We'll call you again with more instructions," he said. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Do not leave your house. Do not contact anybody. This is a matter of national security, as well as your personal safety, Miss Carson." The line went dead before I could ask any further questions. My mind raced. Could my information really have been stolen? A dozen anxious thoughts wrestled in my mind. When I got home, the phone rang once more. It was the same unknown number. I answered quickly. "Miss Carson," the voice said. "You're alone, correct?" I glanced around the small apartment, paranoid. "Yes," I replied. "Lock your doors. Pull the blinds. The hackers we're tracking might have your location." His tone oozed authority, and fear swallowed my rational thinking. "Now, I need some basic details to confirm your identity and run a quick check." "Okay." My voice was trembling. "Please provide your full name, date of birth, and an account number associated with the boots purchase you made recently.
Do this now, Miss Carson.
I hesitated, but then recalled that the coupon I had used might have been part of some scam. Maybe that was how my information got leaked. I reasoned he wouldn't ask for anything personal if this was standard procedure, so I complied. My name is Olivia Carson. Date of birth is May 14th, 1991. Account number is... I paused to grab my purse and read the digits of my debit card statement. It's 2785. He cut me off.
Slowly, please. And I also need your PIN to run a secure database comparison. This is to ensure that your card wasn't cloned.
Something inside me screamed that this was wrong, but fear trumped instinct. I recited my PIN, the 4 digits echoing in my ears like a death knell.
Good,
He said.
we'll process this. It shouldn't take long.
There was a rustling sound on the line, followed by a muffled conversation. Perhaps he was talking to someone else. I caught bits like database check and verification process. It sounded official enough that I remained hooked.
Miss Carson, we've encountered some alarming data.
He said when he returned.
To finalize the clearance, we need to ensure you're not hiding any evidence. The criminals we're after have used carriers, who sometimes tape items to their bodies. This might sound unorthodox, but I need visual confirmation you have no contraband.
Visual confirmation?
I'll call you on video. Please answer. And Miss Carson, you must follow my instructions to the letter.
Moments later, my phone buzzed. I stared at the screen, dread pounding in my chest. But if I truly was under suspicion, could I risk ignoring the instructions of a supposed cybercrime officer? With shaking hands, I answered. His face was obscured. He was wearing a cap, the camera angled awkwardly.
Please, step back so I can see you.
He ordered. I did as told, standing in my living room.
Now, turn slowly.
I revolved in place, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment and fear. Then he said,
I need you to remove your shirt. Slowly.
What? My voice cracked. This doesn't sound right,
Miss Carson,
he said gravelly.
your life, your reputation, they're all on the line. The criminals we're after have hidden banned substances and devices tapped to individuals' torsos. You must comply if you want to be cleared of all charges.
My entire body went cold. I'd hear about bizarre law enforcement tactics in extreme situations, and I was in no position to question authority if I truly was a suspect. So I obeyed. I did what he said. When he asked me to remove my trousers, I was shaking so badly I could barely unbutton them. Suddenly, a loud ping interrupted my humiliation. A banking app alert flashed on my phone. I glanced at it. Suspicious deduction of $2,500 from your account. Another ping. Another $1,000 gone. My breath halted. The realization crashed down like a tidal wave. I was being scammed. No, stop! I shouted. You're stealing my money!
Don't hang up.
He barked, a menacing anger lacing his words.
We're almost done here. Then everything will be reversed.
I could barely contain my horror. I ended the call abruptly and immediately tried to dial my bank. My heart pounded so forcefully it hurt. My hands shook so much I could barely press the right digits. After several tense moments, a woman from the bank answered.
Miss Carson,
She said gently.
I'm afraid there have been multiple withdrawals from your account. I'll freeze your account right away. Please visit our branch or contact the local authorities to file a fraud report.
I slid to the floor, leaning against the couch, tears burning my eyes. My mind whirled with images of the call, the man's voice, my own foolish compliance. How could I have been so gullible? Panicking, I called Lucy. She picked up on the first ring.
Hey, Liv. What's going on? You never call me this late.
Lucy, I whispered, my voice trembling.
I did something so stupid. I just got scammed. I think I've lost thousands. Oh, God,
she said, sounding fully alert now.
Are you safe?
I'm at home. I locked the doors. I don't think he can actually come here.
Hang tight,
Lucy said.
I'm on my way.
While I waited, I tried to gather my scattered thoughts. I replayed every moment, from the call on the subway to the final, humiliating scene on video. I felt as though I was watching someone else, a naive stranger on a screen. Shame welled up in me. Lucy arrived breathless 15 minutes later.
Liv,
she called from the hallway. I opened the door, and she hugged me before I could utter a word.
We need to report this right now.
We called the police. An officer, a calm, empathetic man named Detective Raymond Holt, arrived at my apartment shortly after. He listened as I recounted the incident, occasionally scribbling notes in a small notepad.
Scammers prey on fear,
Detective Holt said gently.
They often create a scene of urgency or authority to make victims act against their better judgment.
Lucy squeezed my hand.
We'll catch this guy,
she reassured me. I gave Detective Holt every detail I could remember. The phone number, the supposed name Daniel Perez, the times of the calls, and the amounts deducted from my account. I handed him my phone so he could review the call logs. Despite my embarrassment, I told him the full truth.
Don't blame yourself,
he said.
Those criminals are professionals. They do this for a living and are experts at manipulation.
By the time he left, it was nearly midnight. Lucy stayed the night, sleeping on the couch, while I paced the living room, unable to rest. The next morning, I went to the bank in person to confirm the account freeze. They assured me they would do their best to recover the stolen funds, but there were no guarantees. I filed an official fraud report. In the real-life incident, an Ohio woman was scammed out of $6,000 and humiliated by a fraudster posing as a Huntington Bank employee. The scam began with a spoofed call warning of potential fraudulent charges on her account. Following the instructions, she withdrew $6,000 and deposited it into a Chase account via Apple Pay. Later, the fraudster FaceTimed her, requesting a full body scan to verify her identity to a failed transaction. She complied, undressing and spinning in circles, only to hear the scammer laughing. Police are investigating, but suspect the perpetrator is operating from a call center abroad. Huntington Bank emphasized it never contacts customers for sensitive information, and local authorities had previously warned about similar scams.
My 22-year-old son, Jimmy, still lived at home. He worked on his computer all day doing some kind of IT job that I couldn't understand. That was all well and good, but I was worried that he spent too much time online. He never went out. I could hear him talking to people in his room, but it was always through his little microphone. I can't even remember the last time I met one of his friends in real life. Still, he made good money, and I knew that he loved what he did. His father and I mostly left him alone. Most days, we'd only see him when he came downstairs for lunch or dinner. We tried to encourage him to go outside and try to meet people, but he always told us that he was happy. Then, one day, a huge box arrived on our front porch. It was the size of a refrigerator, and it was addressed to Jimmy. I went up to his room and told him that his package had arrived. He screamed at me through his door. "You didn't open it, did you?" He sounded really panicked. Of course not," I said. "Good." And then he went downstairs, and the two of us carried the box into his room. I tried to ask him what it was, but he just said that it was something he'd ordered. I had a really strange feeling about it, but I didn't want him to get mad. Over the next few days, more packages arrived. They were all of different sizes, all addressed to Jimmy. Each one was pretty heavy, so I always helped him carry them up to his room. I knew he wouldn't tell me what they were, so I tried to ask him other questions. I wanted to get any information I could. I asked him if he'd ordered from Amazon, but he said no. He said that he was using a marketplace on the dark web. I had no idea what the dark web was, but it didn't sound good. It sounded illegal. After the 5th or 6th box arrived, Jimmy said that he'd gotten everything he needed. After that, he just stayed up in his room. He didn't even come down to eat dinner with us anymore. In the night, I could hear him go downstairs to fix himself food from the fridge. It was like he was purposely avoiding us. I started to worry that he was doing something really bad with whatever was in those boxes. Maybe he was building a bomb or something. I tried to talk to my husband about this, but he didn't seem to be worried. He just told me that Jimmy was his own man, whatever that meant. A week went by, and I couldn't stand the uncertainty anymore. I sat awake in bed, unable to sleep. And when I heard Jimmy sneak downstairs to make his food, I decided to go into his room to see once and for all what was in those boxes. I quietly walked down the hall and into his bedroom. I didn't want to turn on the light, so I used the flashlight on my phone to look around. Hello, Jimmy, you're back already? A woman's voice asked. I gasped. There was a woman in here. I shined the light into the corner of the room and saw the most horrifying thing I'd ever seen. A woman sat on a tiny stool, but she wasn't human. She was some sort of robot, and her face looked like one of those Japanese cartoons that Jimmy used to watch when he was a kid. Jimmy had ordered a robot from the dark web. For what? Companionship? Sex? I felt like throwing up. What's wrong, Jimmy? The woman asked me. I guess she couldn't tell the difference between me and my son. What are you? I asked her. I don't understand, she said. Ask your question again, please. The light clicked on. What are you doing? Jimmy screamed. He stood in the doorway, furious. I'd been caught. I had to explain myself. I was just worried about you. I worried that you had something dangerous in here. She's not dangerous, he screamed. I love her. Honey, let's go downstairs and talk about this, okay? Whatever you want to say to me, he said. You can say it in front of Rinko. Are you okay, Jimmy? The robot woman asked. Your voice is loud. By that point, the commotion had woken up my husband, Daniel. He walked into the room, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, and asked what was going on. It took him a few seconds to see the robot woman. Jesus! He shouted. Don't talk to Rinko like that, Jimmy shouted. My husband is a very calm and reasonable man, but when he disagrees with something, he will fight anyone who gets in his way. He pushed past Jimmy and charged toward the woman. This is wrong, he shouted. I will not allow this thing in my house. The robot had wires connecting the back of her head to some kind of computer box on the floor. He started pulling them out, trying to shut her down. Jimmy literally jumped on his father's back, trying to pull him away. But Jimmy wasn't very strong, so Daniel just shook him loose. Jimmy fell onto the floor, watching with horror as his father tried to shut down the robot. From the ground, Jimmy looked up and shouted, Rinko, defend yourself! The robot woman blinked once, and then she raised both of her arms. She struck Daniel on either side of the head. It didn't seem like she hit him hard, but he instantly collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. I needed to get help fast. I called the police and told them to send an ambulance here as soon as possible. I said my husband was hurt. I didn't mention any more specifics because they might have thought it was a prank call. Jimmy glared at me and ordered me to take his father out of the room. Of course I wasn't going to do that. He just had a head injury. There was no way I'd try to move his body and cause any more damage.
I told him that we'd just wait here until the ambulance arrived. No, Jimmy said, no one else can see her. He raced over to the robot and unplugged her. Then he carried her stiff body to his closet and hid her inside.
Very soon after that, the paramedics arrived to take Daniel to the hospital. A policeman came in and asked us how Daniel had gotten hurt. I started to answer, but then Jimmy said that he'd hit his father. He took responsibility, and the cop asked him to come down to the station and give a statement. As they left, Jimmy told me, "Do not touch anything." When they were both gone, I went into his closet and pulled out that terrible robot woman. I carried her downstairs and into the backyard, where I buried her behind our shed. Now, Daniel had a concussion, but he's recovering nicely. Jimmy was not charged with anything, so he's back home now. He keeps demanding to know where I took Brinko, but I won't tell him. I'm worried that he'll just order another one, but if he does, I'm finally going to kick him out of the house. I can't live with something like that under my roof.